There was a time when everything felt ordinary. The world moved fast and everyone seemed to know their place, running after things they didn't need, pretending to be certain about lives that felt empty inside. In that noise there was one person who began to feel the quiet ache. Not sadness exactly, more like the feeling that something invisible was missing. They couldn't name it, but they could feel it everywhere. At work, surrounded by smiles that didn't reach the eyes. At home, scrolling endlessly through lives that weren't theirs. In the mirror, watching their own reflection feel like a stranger. They began to wonder, is this all there is? That question, though small, was the spark that started everything. Because once you ask that sincerely, life starts to answer. Not with comfort, but with collapse. The first cracks appeared quietly. Little things stopped making sense. Why do people chase things that never make them happy? Why do we fear being alone when the world around us feels lonelier? Why do we keep running from silence, as if it's hiding something dangerous? The truth is, it is. Silence is where the system starts to crumble. When you slow down enough to listen, you start to hear how loud the illusions have become. Every advertisement, every trend, every dream, whispering the same command: be more, do more, buy more. But beneath that noise, something ancient still waits. A truth that doesn't belong to society or religion or language. It belongs to the soul. The more this person listened, the more reality started to shift. They began to see how much of their life wasn't theirs. Every choice traced back to fear. Fear of being nothing, fear of being different, fear of being free. Freedom sounds beautiful, but to the conditioned mind it feels like death. Because real freedom means letting go of everything you thought you were. And that's the deep truth they'll never tell you. You were trained to obey patterns, not to question them. You were taught to follow, not to feel. To imitate, not to imagine. And when your soul starts remembering what it truly is, the world begins to label you lost, crazy, or different. But that's when you're finally beginning to wake up. The awakening doesn't arrive as light. It begins as darkness. As everything false in your life starts to fall apart. The friends who only knew your mask stop calling. The things you once cared about lose meaning. And the future you were taught to dream about starts to look like a cage. It's painful, yes. But pain is how truth clears the way. It doesn't destroy you, it destroys what you are not. And so the person sat in their room one night, staring into nothingness. The thoughts were loud, the emotions heavy, the silence alive. Then something inside whispered, stop trying to fix it, just watch. That moment changed everything. Because for the first time they didn't fight their own thoughts. They simply watched. And in that stillness they realized something shocking. There was a part of them that was untouched by pain, untouched by fear, untouched by thought itself. It wasn't the mind observing, it was awareness. Silent, infinite, present. That was the beginning of remembering. The deep truth no one told them. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. You are the space in which all thoughts rise and fade. Days turned into weeks. And the person started noticing how life moved without their control. The breath, it came and went on its own. The heart, it beat without permission. The world, it unfolded without needing their constant interference. So what was the self they were clinging to? Just an illusion of control. Everything they feared losing had never truly been theirs. Even me was just a story, a collection of memories pretending to be a person. That realization was both terrifying and freeing. Because when you stop identifying with the story, you stop suffering with it. The more they saw, the lighter everything became. The world didn't change, their perception did. The same chaos, the same people, the same noise. But now there was peace underneath it all. They began to walk through life like a witness, watching dreams rise and fade like waves on an ocean. The ocean never fears the wave. It knows every wave returns home. And so do you. You were never lost, just dreaming. And the dream was never wrong, it was just temporary. But the world doesn't like people who wake up. Calls them rebels, outsiders, spiritual, delusional, anything to keep distance from the truth. Because truth is contagious. And if enough people remember who they are, the illusion loses its power. That's why they'll never tell you the truth. That heaven and hell aren't places, they're states of consciousness. That love isn't found, it's remembered. That freedom isn't given, it's realized. You are not becoming, you are awakening. The person, now calmer than ever, began to laugh softly at the irony. All their life they had chased what they already were. All their effort had been a search for what was never missing. The deep truth was simple, too simple for the mind to believe. Life was never about becoming perfect. It was about remembering perfection was never lost. The more they let go, the more whole they felt. And one day they stopped seeking altogether. Because there was nowhere left to go. Only here. When seeking ends, something softer begins. There is a quiet that doesn't feel empty anymore. Feels alive. The person woke one morning and noticed the light falling across the floor. The dust moved through the sunbeams like tiny universes. Nothing extraordinary had happened, yet everything felt holy. For the first time, ordinary life was enough. They watched the city waking, the noise returning, but inside there was stillness. Each sound arrived, danced for a while, and disappeared into silence. They realized the silence never left. It had been waiting behind every sound. That's when the next truth revealed itself. Peace isn't something you find. It's what remains when you stop resisting what is. They began to see that resistance was the root of all suffering. Every should, every shouldn't, every demand that life be different, was a small war against the present moment. And each time they dropped a war, freedom expanded. They noticed how people cling to pain because it's familiar. We hold our wounds like identity cards, afraid that without them we might disappear. But when you finally put them down, you don't vanish. You return. One evening they sat by a river. The current moved with effortless strength. A fallen leaf floated by, spinning, surrendering. The river carried it without argument. That's when they understood what surrender means. It's not giving up. It's giving in to the flow that has always carried you. The mind fears this because it can't control the current. But life doesn't need your control. It needs your trust. Trust is the doorway to the unknown. And the unknown is where truth lives. As trust deepened, the illusions kept falling away. They saw how much of human life is built on fear of death, and how that fear quietly directs every decision. We build empires to be remembered. We collect things to feel permanent. We chase love to avoid disappearing. But the truth they'll never tell you is that death is not the opposite of life. It's the opposite of birth. Life has no opposite. It simply changes form. The one who witnesses change never dies. Only the forms do. Days passed like pages of a book being turned by the wind. Each one revealed a simpler truth. They learned that forgiveness isn't about others. It's about releasing yourself from the story. That gratitude isn't an emotion. It's the recognition that everything is a gift, even the hard parts. That love isn't a feeling. It's the natural state when the false self is quiet. Love had always been here, but the noise of fear drowned it out. The deeper they went, the less they could explain. Words began to feel too small. Truth wasn't an idea anymore. It was a living presence, breathing through everything. They walked through a crowded street and saw no strangers. Only reflections. Every face a mirror. Every story another version of the same consciousness playing different roles. That's when the next realization dawned. There is only one life, wearing billions of masks. To harm another is to harm yourself in disguise. That's why compassion isn't a moral duty. It's clarity. People around them started to notice something had changed. They smiled differently, moved differently. There was peace that couldn't be faked. But peace threatens those still at war with themselves. Some mocked, some doubted, some walked away. And yet, the person felt no need to defend anything. Because when you know the truth, you stop needing others to agree with it. You simply live it. One night, under a sky full of stars, they looked up and whispered, "Show me who I really am." The answer wasn't thunder or visions. It was silence. And in that silence, the last layer of fear dissolved. They saw that everything, the stars, the river, the breath, the thought, was made of the same awareness, the same infinite presence wearing forms. Nothing was separate, never had been. The seeker disappeared into what had been seeking all along. From that moment, living became effortless. There were still challenges, but no resistance to them. Sorrow came and went like weather. Joy came and went like weather. But the sky, awareness, remained untouched. They laughed at the simplicity of it all. The deep truth people never tell you is not hidden in scriptures or theories. It's right here. In this breath. In this moment. In this you. Living the deep truth. The person returned to the world, but not as they once were. Something had changed permanently. They still walked, talked, worked, loved. But the I, doing all of it, had dissolved into something vast. They saw that life doesn't need to be controlled, only witnessed. That every event, no matter how small or painful, was another way the universe was teaching itself to remember. When they walked into a room, people felt it. That unspoken stillness. It wasn't charisma, it was presence. The kind that needs no validation. The kind that doesn't demand attention but commands it through peace. They realized that awakening doesn't make you special. It makes you simple. You stop performing. You stop chasing outcomes. You stop needing to prove that you've found yourself. Because the self that seeks cannot find anything. It is what is being sought. They started to notice the illusions most people live under. The idea that happiness is waiting somewhere in the future. That peace comes after success. That love must be earned. They saw how society sells dreams that keep people asleep. Endless distractions, endless noise. So that no one ever stops long enough to feel the silence beneath it all. But once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it. You can no longer participate in the lie. One day an old friend asked, "Why do you seem so calm even when things go wrong?" They smiled gently and said, "Because nothing truly goes wrong, it just goes differently than I expected." The friend didn't understand. How could they? Truth can't be told, it can only be seen. And that's why most people never hear it. Because they're not listening with silence. They're listening with the noise of themselves. They began to live a life of quiet service, not out of duty, but out of love. When you realize everyone is you in disguise, compassion becomes as natural as breathing. They helped without needing thanks. They gave without counting. They forgave without memory. Because the deeper truth is this. Love is not something you do. It's what remains when you stop doing. Sometimes they would walk through the city and watch the rush of human desire. The endless chase for meaning, wealth, attention, validation. And a tear would fall, not out of sadness but understanding. They saw themselves in every hurried step, every anxious glance, every desperate scroll through the phone. They remembered being trapped in that same illusion, believing that life was something to win, instead of something to awaken within. The deep truth they'll never tell you is this. You don't have to become more. You have to become less. Until nothing remains but what's real. When you lose the false, you don't end. You begin. Because the universe doesn't need another perfect person. It needs a present one. As years passed, nothing about their outer life looked extraordinary. They lived quietly. A small home, a few close friends, laughter, silence, presence. But inside infinity, they had found the kingdom not in heaven, but in the moment. They realized that enlightenment isn't a destination. It's a way of seeing. And once you see, everywhere is home. Sometimes people came seeking answers. "Teach us," they said. But the person only smiled and replied, "Look inside. That's where I found everything." Some went away disappointed, hoping for a technique, a ritual, a secret formula. But there was none. Because truth has never been hidden, only ignored. At night, they would sit under the open sky and feel the vastness of it. They knew now that the stars were not above. They were within. Each point of light, another reflection of consciousness, watching itself through time. Everything was one seamless movement. The breath, the wind, the thought, the heartbeat, the silence between words. They had become the witness of it all. And yet even the witness dissolved. Only being remained. That's the deep truth people won't tell you. Because if they did, if they truly understood it, the world as we know it would crumble. No one could be controlled, because there would be no fear. No one could be sold happiness, because they would realize they already are it. No one could be divided, because they would see that every other is simply themselves in another costume. The truth isn't hidden by the powerful. It's hidden by the mind. And the moment you stop believing every thought, you become ungovernable. You become free. And maybe that's why few people will ever tell you this truth. Because freedom is the one thing that can't be sold. It can only be lived. The person smiled, watching the sun set. The light melted into the horizon. A soft golden silence spreading across the sky. They whispered softly, "I was never lost. I was dreaming." And for the first time, they didn't wake up. They simply became awake.